Good morning, good afternoon, good day. Very warm welcome. Let's give a couple of minutes for our attendees to join the webinar, and then we start at the top of the hour. I think Zoom is waiting for 1 o'clock sharp because I don't see anyone coming into the meeting yet. It's 12:58, so in 2 seconds, we'll have attendees joining. Welcome, MD.
Hello, MD, and welcome.
Thank you. How are you, Paul?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Good. Hi, Lai. How are you doing?
Hi, MD. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Okay. You're welcome.
So good afternoon. I see that we have attendees joining the meeting. A very warm welcome to everyone. Good morning, good day, depending on where you're joining us from. And we are delighted to welcome you to our webinar session. Let's give you a couple of minutes to settle in. As you join, please head to the chat and tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us where you're joining from, your name, your organization, mingle a little as we get ready to kick off session 2 of the Academia 2063 El Nino 2024 in Southern Africa webinar series. This session provides a platform for us to discuss the findings of our El Nino 2024 research brief series, which looks at the impact of the El Nino-induced drought on staple crop production in selected countries in Southern Africa. My name is Lai Butake, and I'm the Director of Communication and Outreach for Academia 2063, and I am joining from Dakar, Senegal. Again, as you join, please don't hesitate to head to the chat and tell us a little bit more about yourself as we prepare for a highly interactive session. I'm delighted to be your host for this second edition with many more to come. And over the next hour, we will discuss the findings of Brief 2, which focuses on the impact of the El Nino-induced drought on maize production in Zimbabwe. As always, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts on this research series. We want to hear your thoughts on the presentation of findings and on the conversation. We want to hear your thoughts on policy recommendations for countries experiencing the El Nino weather effects. And to make your voice heard, please head to the chat, drop some comments, head to the Q&A if you have any questions, any observations, any contributions that you want to be brought to the floor. Please do that in the Q&A section below so that we can bring it to your attention and get input from the presenter and the discussants. And of course, once we get to the discussion segment of this session, you will have the opportunity to raise your hand if you have any questions. Now, without wasting any more time, I will invite our first speaker for today. He is the co-author of Brief 2 of the El Nino 2024 in Southern Africa research series, senior scientist at Academia 2063, Dr. Paul Maina-Guthiga, who will be making a presentation of the findings of Brief 2, which focuses on Zimbabwe. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Lai. Hello, everyone. good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are joining. We are glad that you are with us today as we go through today's webinar. Allow me first to share my screen presentation, just a moment. So there we go. Make it the full mode. So thank you very much. So today we'll be looking at the impacts of El Nino-induced drought in Zimbabwe. This is the second in a series. A few weeks ago, we looked at Malawi. And we all know probably by now that the Southern Africa region has actually been experiencing a strong El Nino weather effect since last year. And that weather effect intensified later in the year and is still on up to around mid this year, probably around this time going forward, when it is expected to subside. This kind of weather is usually characterized by above average temperatures and below normal rainfall. And it is actually one of the phenomena that is one of the strongest drivers that impact agricultural production in the Southern Africa. The unique thing about this current El Nino weather effect in Southern Africa is that it is, has been described as the worst mid-season dry spell in over 100 years, and actually has caused the lowest mid-season rainfall in 40 years. So its effect actually are very serious. So if looking at the Climate Prediction Center maps that actually show the likelihood of below average precipitation in the early part of the year, or the second quarter from April to June, if you look at the map on the left, you can see actually a large area within Southern Africa was actually predicted to receive below average rainfall, of course, including Zimbabwe, a large part of South Africa and other countries in the region. Now the prediction going forward from this month to August show the drought areas, shrinking a bit. So maybe as we go more into the year, these conditions will reverse and maybe there'll be better times ahead. But looking at the past, a majority of the countries in the region have reported the potential decline in staple crop production, especially maize, due to this El Nino drought. Zimbabwe is one of those major producers of maize in the Southern Africa region. I'll be showing that in a map together with other countries like South Africa, Malawi, and Zambia. And in the country, maize is very strategic food commodity because it's a staple and also an important raw material for industrial processes. It accounts for over 50% of the average calorie intake for the population, and also enters as a raw material in production of flour, oil, grit, and starch. And its production is really highly dependent on rainfall because the majority of farmers depend on rain to produce the maize. So in a situation where there is less rain, then you expect that most farmers would be affected and their production will go down. Of course, when you have an El Nino, like the one that has been experienced in the recent past, it can really have devastating effects on maize production and also expose households to risk of food insecurity. So the entry point for this brief is really to understand the spatial distribution of the impacts of this drought. Because while we know the whole country may suffer drought, the different areas within the country might have variation in the intensity of that drought and hence the impact on maize production. So that is really the entry point for this brief. So as I was saying earlier, together with South Africa, Malawi, and Zambia, Zimbabwe is one of the largest producers of maize in Southern Africa. Looking at data from 2015 to 2022, we would say it is ranking the fourth among these producers. And on average, the annual production is about 1.2 million metric tons. This data is based on FAO. So as I was saying, because of the differentiated impacts partially of this drought, we anticipate and expect, of course, that the scale of devastation will be more serious, if you like, in parts of the country where there's, if you like, both the severe drought and high population density. Furthermore, areas that have high level of chronic vulnerability to begin with are actually the ones that are expected to even be hit harder. So understanding these nuances of the spatial impact of drought and how communities are exposed is important, especially in a situation where emergency interventions are required, because when you have a very severe reduction in production and people are suffering famine, you certainly need to intervene. And therefore, you want to have a prioritization, something to evidence for prioritizing your intervention, because the government or all other partners may not have capacity to cover the whole country at the same time. But in addition, understanding how these impacts are felt across space is also important for long-term interventions to foster community resilience. Because we know that in the era of climate variability, we can only anticipate that these things will keep coming, probably more frequent and with even more severe intensity. And therefore, in the long term, countries need to plan how to be better prepared, how to build resilience, so that communities are able to really come out of this situation and be able to continue with their livelihood. So this is what this presentation will be about. And I'll begin first by talking about drought index. So drought index measures the severity of drought conditions across a geographical space. And there is a scale here. As the value approaches 0, then the severity of drought increases. And where it's above 1, then that indicates absence of a drought condition. So this map, prepared by Academia 2063, the team that does this prediction, shows that in terms of drought, the areas to the west of the country, the western part, here I see Matabeleland North, here I see Midlands, I see southern parts of Mashonaland West, are the ones that have really are affected by, are most affected by the drought, right? So this area, and of course, there are also parts in the north, like here, where the drought conditions have been quite serious. But the areas to the east, talking of Mashonaland Central, East, Masvingo, Matabeleland South, the drought conditions are less, although there are pockets, of course, within those areas. You can see pockets here. You can also see another pocket around here. But generally, there are large areas where the drought actually is less. So already you can see that while the whole country is experiencing drought, the severity of that drought is varying across space, and the western parts are actually most affected. Now, let's look at this map. This one now is on drought exposure. What this one is doing is combining the first map that I've shown there on drought index and population density. So we want to see, now we know how drought intensity or severity is spread across the country. How about looking at where the people are? So because that can tell us a story. So where there is an overlap between severe drought and a lot of people, and particularly in the rural settings, where people are more dependent on agriculture, that already tells you that would be a priority area for intervention. So what we see is that the areas from the previous map, you notice that the western part of the country had severe drought. We also notice that the population density here is low. You can see the red, high drought, low population density. There are also places with low drought and high population density, but maybe we are very much interested in areas that have high drought and high population density. So, and those are areas in the northern parts of Midlands, southern parts of Mashonaland West, area around Bulawayo, and of course, extensive areas in Mashonaland Central, and also large areas of Manicaland in the eastern part of the country. But some of the areas that are highly impacted by the drought are low population density areas, as I have already mentioned. So these areas that have this color, I think it would be brown, would be areas of interest because there's a sort of simultaneous occurrence of high drought and also coupled with high population density. So having looked at that, we now can move on to the impacts on maize production. Because we say maize is a staple in the country, it's important as food for the people and also as a raw material to the industry. And this drought has had a very serious impact on maize production. And what we see, based also on what Academia 2063 has shown in the predictive work that it does, is that there will be significant reduction in maize production in 2024 compared to 2023. This map is just showing the predicted production in 2024, and areas that are in red, if you like, and this is at the pixel level of the production areas. The areas that are in red will have production of maybe equal to 100 or less. And you can see this is really spread across many areas in the country. Areas that this would be what would be brown sort of, is between 100 and 200 metric tons. Areas in yellow, 200 to 500. And areas that have shades of green going up would be areas where you are likely to have high production. And you can see that there are very few of them. So most areas are anticipated to have low levels of maize production. And as you can see, this map is showing the difference in maize production in 2024 compared to 2023. And in most places, you can see significant reduction. These are the areas in deep red here, show a reduction of over 1,000 metric tons per production area. And you can see they are quite spread all over the place. So in fact, the prediction was showing that maize production in Zimbabwe for 2024 will be drastically lower compared to 2023 by up to 64% when you look at the country cumulatively. But when you go production area by production area, which probably is even more important for at the country level, we notice that there are areas that will really have really experienced a huge reduction in maize production. At least 99% of the districts in the country will experience a reduction in production of 60% and above in 2024 compared to 2023. So overall, we are talking about, a reduction of 64% is quite significant, and therefore there will be huge deficit of the staple crop across the country, and therefore certainly interventions are required at all levels to deal with this situation. And in terms of looking at conclusions and implication, already there are reports that show that this El Nino-induced drought has created a food security crisis in the country. Predictions that were done by, I think, WFP early part of the year, the first 3 months, was showing that about 6 million people were expected to be food insecure. And this was actually even in urban areas where 1.7 million people, or about 35% of the urban population, are actually expected to be food insecure in the year 2024. Because of the reduced production is going to bring the prices high, there will be high inflation, coupled with other macroeconomic issues of fluctuating exchange rate that affect the purchasing power of families. So we have a situation of a serious food insecurity, both in the rural and the urban areas. And therefore, some emergency response, emergency assistance is required, and there has to be prioritization of the most affected areas and the most affected people so that they can get the help that they need. And I know for sure the government of the Republic of Zimbabwe is doing something to that effect. In the long run, which is more important, there's really need to invest in sustainable solutions that address the root cause of vulnerability. Here, we know that countries are affected both ways. Sometimes the extreme droughts, sometimes are the floods. So really building on the pillars of resilience for the household and the communities is very important going into the future. So I think that will be coming to the end of the presentation. But those who may be interested to read further, this presentation is coming from 2 publications that are already available online. There's this brief number 2 already available online, and also the Agua Crop Production Forecast Brief for Zimbabwe that was published in April 2024. They are available online, and you can get more information from them. Otherwise, I thank you all for your kind listening. And back to you, Lai.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Mainaguthiga, for that presentation. And we will be sharing the links in the chat throughout the course of this session. I'm sure you have some reflections or some questions on the presentation, and I invite you once again, as they come to mind, please head to the Q&A and drop them there. And when we will get to the discussion segment of this session, you will also have the opportunity to raise your hands and exchange directly with the scientist on this panel. So next up, it is my pleasure to invite our discussant to comment on the presentation of findings. He is an agriculture, environmental, and natural resource economist at the Faculty of Agriculture, Environment, and Food Systems at the University of Zimbabwe. Please welcome Dr. Emmanuel Mwakiwa for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lai, for such an introduction, and also for giving me this opportunity to be a discussant to Dr. Paul's paper. Firstly, I would like to commend Academia 2063, El Nino 2024 Southern Africa webinar series, which will enable us, which enable them to share their findings on the impact of the El Nino 2024 in the region. At least for this series is for Zimbabwe. So we are proud to be included in that in that study. As the evidence which has been shown is that we have climate change and it's here to stay. So we can't change that in terms of the climate change, but we need to manage its impact and other manageable parameters. So the paper that has been presented by Dr. Paul, entitled "Impacts of El Nino-Induced Drought in Zimbabwe," we actually thank him and his team, including Dia and Ndoe, for preparing and also for sharing their findings. Just like what Dr. Paul has indicated, Zimbabwe, like the rest of Southern Africa, experienced the El Nino weather effects since 2023. But we know that El Nino has been with us, so it's critical to indicate that this is the current wave that has been affecting us and is continuing to affect us. So we need actually to manage, because we'll experience this now and also in future. And like it has been indicated, the effects has intensified and are likely to do so till mid-2024. I think all in Zimbabwe are actually agree with the results that the drought was severe, like what was indicated, that the effects from the paper, that it was actually the worst since in 100 years. So you can see the importance and the effects of this drought for Zimbabwe and its our Southern Africa neighbors. So also it's important to indicate that climate variability associated with El Nino is one of the strongest drivers, like what is indicated, impacting agriculture production in Southern Africa. Zimbabwe and other countries reported decline in crop production, especially for maize, which is our staple. And because our farmers depend on rain-fed agriculture, that's why actually, because the drought now it's maximum impact. So this drought exposed households to food insecurity, although it's at individual level, but if you look at a national level, its impact actually is worse. Of course, there are other factors that affect productivity, like poor use of organic and inorganic fertilizers. There are other factors like technology, irrigation, absence of irrigation for our farmers. So these also are some of the factors that we should emphasize, I think, in the discussion. Although in this case, we know that we are actually talking about drought, which worsens the situation. But of course, there are also other factors. It is correct that understanding the differential in terms of spatial impacts of the drought and at community, it adds to community vulnerability, but also it's very critical for prioritizing areas of intervention during some crisis. So the paper, I think the focus of the paper, looking at spatial variations of the impact of drought, is very, very essential, because when a shock strikes, it does not affect the country or the individual at equal levels over space, but it's differential. So looking at differential impacts will assist the policymakers to make the correct interventions, to prioritize which areas should be prioritized and which areas should be should be assisted first. So in addition, it allows for better planning, implementation of interventions, and also informs long-term interventions like what has been indicated in terms of absorbing some shocks. And also it will assist in terms of prioritizing on whether which areas should we boost. In this case, this is a shock. Which areas should we boost some resilience? So I think also because this El Nino, this shock, the weather shock, occurred when we had also other shocks. I think it is also very important to even indicate that there are other shocks, for instance, like the Russia-Ukraine war, the COVID-19, in terms of Zimbabwe, like what the paper has indicated, microeconomic conditions, when that were also occurring when this El Nino occurred. So it's also important to indicate maybe the importance of this shock in relationship to other shocks that were especially in Southern Africa, even at global level, were experiencing at the same time. I like the study because of several aspects. One is the spatial aspects that I've indicated, because like we have indicated, the drought effects are not the same everywhere, but they are actually spatial. So this is very, very important. But on top of that, I also like the use of an index, because like the paper has indicated, is that they use the drought index. Why it's important is because it is difficult to measure drought basing only on one variable. You cannot say that because there was no rainfall, so this area is worse off. So we need actually to also to look at other variables so that we can prioritize, we can understand if especially the severity and also other different scales and also other aspects. So this is very important. So I like the paper because of that it did not only look at one variable, but to look at an index, which is actually a mixture of different variables. And also use of an index takes into consideration other important variables. For instance, you are not looking at only at a macro scale or micro variable, micro variable, but you are looking at the overall picture, the big picture of what is happening, so that we can inform our policy makers. And as you already indicated in the results, using an index will allow to us to measure the region which is more vulnerable, which is important in drought monitoring and also early warning processes. So it is important for the study to add more detail on the drought index, because we have indicated that this is the index, but what are the variables were included in that index? What is their weight, and also why were the weights given, so that everyone can understand. Of course, I understand that because of time, this could not be included, but I think it's very important to indicate that, so that where policymakers or even their policy advisors will know and have more information on that particular index, so that when they advise the policymakers, it will be clear, and also they actually also put the emphasis. As presented by Dr. Paul, a drought index shows that which areas were more vulnerable. For instance, it is based on which areas were high drought. Actually four areas or four sections that indicated like one: high drought, low population densities; low drought, low population density; high drought, high population; and lastly, low drought, high population. So like is indicated, there are actually particular areas which had high drought, high population, which actually is an interest for policymakers, development partners, civil organization to intervene. Because if you look at the picture, it will be very clear for policymakers to understand, even for development partners to see which areas they can concentrate on in terms of the intervention. So I think this is a very, very important tool that this paper is contributing to science and also to rural development. So I actually comment that. So these are very important findings that should be well. Because of the importance of this mapping, I think these are very interesting, important, and very interesting results, which should be well discussed and well explained and well packaged for our policymakers and also for our other stakeholders. so as that these stakeholders can use this in designing proper relevant interventions for the affected areas. And also an interesting result of this study is actually looking at maize, which actually is a very, very important crop, like what Dr. Paul has indicated. Maize is staple food for Zimbabwe, is very, very important, even for Southern Africa. And it's also important also for livestock. So it's expected from the paper, they've actually indicated that I think we have seen the map that they've indicated the results, which actually is showing that there are fewer areas with less than over 3,000 metric tons for the predicted maize production for 2024, whereas a lot of areas are in the less than 200 metric tons predicted maize production in 2024, which is an indicator for severe food insecurity. So it actually brings a flag to policymakers and also to other stakeholders. Then also another interesting result that they've shown is that maize production difference between 2024 and 2023. The map actually is showing that there's a lot of red areas, which means actually most areas at maize production which they lessened, but it was a great difference, and there was also a great difference if you compare 2024 and 2023. I think roughly we understand that 2023 production was over 2 million tons, but in 2024 the expected production is less than 1 million tons, even from our early warning system in Zimbabwe. So already, as indicated, we are predicting that the 64% reduction in maize production, which agrees actually to the actual data that our statisticians have. So these are also another red flag for food insecurity for the region. Then, in terms of the conclusions that have been given by our presenter, is that 6 million people in rural, not only in rural, but also in urban area, are actually going to face food insecurity due to the El Nino drought, coupled by the microeconomic conditions. So it's going to worsen the situation. Already, the people were suffering, but now El Nino has actually worsened that, as we have seen from the results. So, like indicated, emergency assistance is required, but also prioritization is needed. So this report, I think, is very, very good to contribute to that prioritization in terms of who should be targeted and where are they. So this is very, very important. So there's need to invest in, like it's indicated, in sustainable solutions, so as to arrest the root causes of vulnerability, but increase the resilience of the communities as discussed. I thank you very much. This is my contribution in terms of discussion. Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwakiwa, for those very elaborate comments on the research, on the presentation of findings. Before I invite Dr. Hassan Lee, I would like to give Dr. Paul Guthiger a chance to comment on the dissertation presented by the discussant.
So, okay, thank you very much, Lai. Thank you very much, Dr. Mwakiwa. I think your synthesis was very good, very much appreciated. And we are also glad that the evidence that has been put together in this brief and this presentation speaks well to the situation in Zimbabwe, and that the information therein would actually be of use to the policymakers and other stakeholders as they embark on dealing with this crisis. So I'm glad. So there is one comment you made, which is very important, about a little elaboration on the methodology used in generating the drought index. I am aware that there is another separate brief or CASI field notes that academia has published, but I would now maybe I take it back to Lai because I know she is going to invite Dr. Racine Lee, who leads this work on prediction, to say something on the methodology for generating the drought index. Otherwise, your comments and inputs are appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I would now like to invite our Director of the Department of Data Management, Digital Products and Technology to tell us a little bit more about the Africa crop production, the AFCP model, which is used by Academia 2063 scientists to make this crop production forecast. Dr. Hassan Ali, if you can hear me, over to you.
Yes, can you hear me, Dr. Lai?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to intervene maybe with the three talking points. The first one is how did we compute the drought index? So it is a combination of two indices. The first one is the normalized difference vegetation index that has been regularized, and another one that is for the land surface temperature. The idea is to use greenness and the presence and vigor of vegetation combined with also land surface temperature. Both also are indicating if we have enough water supply that will teach us if an area is prone to drought or not. That's what you see in the modified vegetation water supply index that has been used in this brief and in general in this series of El Nino publications. Now the value will be between 0 and 1. If there's a drought in an area, it will be between 0 and 1. The lowest the value, the highest the drought will be, and the highest the value, closer to 1, the lowest the drought will be. That's why you see in the map that those values are closer to 0, has colors that are more bright compared to the regions where the MVWSI, which is the index for water supply and vegetation, is closer to 1. That's the first aspect when it comes to the methodology computing the drought index. The second talking point is about the use of the AFCP. AFCP stands for Africa Food Crop Production Model. This is a model that has been developed by Academia 2063 scientists. And it is using a combination of remote sensing data and artificial intelligence to predict food crop production so far in 47 African countries and 10 crops. The way the model is built is to collect information using satellite data, in particular land surface temperature, vegetation index, rainfall, evapotranspiration. We are working towards incorporating more parameters that are important for crop growth. Once we collect those information, we combine them with historical production data. Those are our training data sets, what we use actually to train a model that is artificial intelligence based to learn the interrelationships between the two sets of parameters. Once we reach convergence and then the model has been trained successfully, we use it actually to now predict what is the potential with high accuracy of production in a specific area. So the remote sensing provides biogeophysical information as well as granularity, where the artificial intelligence model brings in the anticipatory or predictive modeling aspects. Combined now, the result will be the map that you've seen so far in this webinar, where you have hexagons of regions of productions, and we start producing forecasts in the near future. Now, the last talking point that I would like to mention is this work actually shows the importance of combining emerging technologies to bridge the data gap in the agricultural sector, but also how do we start taking anticipatory approaches when it comes to tackling the impact of climate change and climate variabilities in Africa. And here you've seen so far that having access to those maps where you have vulnerabilities, when you have, for example, forecasts in terms of production, now countries are equipped and they can add value with their own knowledge to say what are the next best action that we could take to ease the burden of climate change and climate variability in communities. So this is something that we are working on here at Academia 2063, in particular within the department. And there are other knowledge products that are available on the website or will be available soon to inform our decision makers into taking more informed decision making, and for them to add value to those forecasts and hope for the best outcome when it comes to climate change. So, and impact on agriculture. Thank you for allowing me to share our inputs in this webinar. Thank you so much, and congratulations to the authors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Lee. And now the floor is open for any questions, contributions. If you want to make your voice heard, please raise your hand and you will be given a chance to intervene. Otherwise, you can head to the Q&A section below and add your questions. I see a comment from Cleti Lukusa, and they say over-reliance on natural rains is a big challenge to the majority of farmers in Africa, which exposes them to unpredictable weather changes, including El Nino effects. There is need for establishment of policies that promote irrigation, both on small and large scale, to overcome such unpredictable shocks that lead to adverse food insecurity. Thank you, Cleti Lusaka, for that comment. There is indeed a need. One of the recommendations from the presentation was that we need sustainable solutions to address the root causes of the vulnerabilities. But how? If we're talking about roughly over 6 million people expected to be food secure as a result of this phenomenon, then there's a need for urgent intervention. So I think with the science, we need to discuss the how can we come about these sustainable solutions. I see a hand from Evaristo Mapeza. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, okay, thank you. I think that was an excellent presentation, and I'm actually looking forward to reading the actual publication. So I haven't gone through it, but my small question, I have two small questions. The first one is, how do they overlay the production systems within the different sections? For instance, Zimbabwe, I see some of the areas where are impacted by drought are actually livestock production areas where there's been less crop production. So how do you bring that into play so that when you're making recommendations, they are grounded on that? And then the second question was also to do maybe to move more in terms of pathways for practical action. How do you bring into account, for example, maybe the more nuanced differences in terms of gender, for example? It could be the same drought, but with the differential impacts on men and women in the different agroecological zones. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Evarista, for those questions. The first one I'll give Lee, because it's a more technical question about how we distinguish the production areas for different crops. So maybe he can speak to that. On the second one, I would say yes, that would actually be a good area for further studies, because of course the impact of a shock would have differentiated impacts across gender, across income groups, etc. So I agree with you that is something that could and should be considered maybe in another study. But let me give the floor to Dr. Lee for the first question.
Thank you so much. The way we disentangle a map to recognize an area of production of a specific crop is called crop mapping. And it's a combination of using crop footprints from satellite data because they have specific signatures. And then we associate that with sensors that have been conducted on the ground. Now, once you know how to recognize a signature of a specific crop, and you work with colleagues enumerators to tell you exactly what type of crop it is, from now, it becomes possible to build a model that we call a crop type mapping model, that will take into account spectral signatures of crops, now to tell us based on what the model has learned so far, what type of crop it is. So this is something we use to identify areas of production of specific crops. But I will be very happy to provide more details if needed in terms of detail. I mean, when it comes to the crop mapping, there are some documentation that are available at academia to as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. I don't see any more hands. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have any more contributions. Mr. Mapedza, I hope that their interventions answered your question. But I think a question for Paul, and I guess for all our scientists here, just to rejoin the second point from Mr. Mapedza, we've seen other shocks more recently, the Ukraine crisis and COVID. And from your research, are there any intersections between other crises that we have experienced and continue to experience and El Nino? And from an intervention perspective, what can policymakers learn from these shocks to devise sustainable solutions that address the needs of the most vulnerable groups? So it's an open question for everyone, just reflection for everyone on this call. Paul, since you're the author,
Okay.
I think
Greenwell
contribute. Or Greenwell, do you want to go first, Dr. Machado?
Yeah, I can just say something maybe towards that. Yeah. Again, thanks very much, Lai, Paul, as well as Dr. Makiwa for this, and also thanks for the questions. Yeah, I think one of the things maybe to try and do for policymakers is to think about really having good frameworks for implementing some anticipatory actions. So when this kind of data comes, it comes very early in most cases. These guys are able to do implementation of their models and predictions early enough. And I think then if a government can spend some time to think about how to respond, like having a menu of anticipatory actions early on, taking advantage of this information as well as the information that would have come even before this in terms of which areas are going to be to have high temperatures, or to have high rainfall or no rainfall, etc. I think that can probably help a lot. Now, anticipatory actions can be a lot. They could be in form of already delivering food aid to different places, or already having a budget to put in place a budget to for relief. But it could also be to do with helping countries or helping different places develop capacity to irrigate their crops, for example. Yeah, so I think thinking in advance about this, developing a menu of anticipatory actions could save life, and taking advantage, of course, of the information that is being generated. So this is just something that I thought I can contribute. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Machaya. Dr. Lee, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. There's maybe one contribution that I would like to share here. When it comes to policy making against climate change or for climate resiliency, the bulk of our knowledge, the climate crisis impact on livelihoods, is I think limited by our understanding of the known cause and effect relations of our world. For instance, we know the relationship between, for example, solar radiation and crop growth, but therefore the impact of temperature anomaly on crop growth could be anticipated. But its impact on the geographical distribution and proliferation of dangerous animals, and for example, the impact on our livelihoods, is less understood. So such a representation of our world, while extensive, is not complete. And the endeavor is the main goal of the research community, essentially. Now, what I would like to say is that dealing with the climate crisis requires an iterative learning process due to our knowledge limitation of all interrelationships between entities on Earth, in addition to its dynamics aspect. There will not be a homogeneous and final solution to climate change and climate variability, that's for sure. And even good policies and approaches that yield satisfactory results on communities will somehow need to be revised against context and trade-offs. And one message that I really would like to share here is the utopic scenario of no trade-offs exists only because we don't know yet the full extent of the impacts of decision made, which is again a consequence of our limited understanding of the web of action and reaction chains of the world that surrounds us. However, I think the philosophy that needs to remain is that the comparative advantage of not taking an action is more costly when it comes to climate change, and therefore progress is more important, definitely, than perfection. So let's have that cycle of revisiting our policies depending on the context and the shocks that we will face. Over.
Thanks, Dr. Hassini. Progress is more important than perfection. That's indeed something to remember. I see a hand from Ms. Titi Makombe. Go ahead, Titi.
Yes, can you hear me okay, Lai?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And congratulations to the team for the excellent work. My question is perhaps for Dr. Lee on sort of the work of AGWA, especially as I think of coping strategies. I'm wondering if there are any plans for AGWA to also look at other crops besides food crops, right? Looking at cash crops. I know in Zimbabwe, as part of coping strategies, you'd think perhaps some farmers, especially in the areas that are sort of really affected by this El Nino, they'll tend to perhaps cash crops like cotton, but of course they've also been devastated. So I was just thinking for a more comprehensive look of how this El Nino is really affecting the country. I think there's value in also looking at how it affects other crops outside sort of your traditional food crop. And also I think there was a question about livestock. Perhaps I missed, I think it came up in the other webinar on Malawi, sort of how do you, are there plans to also try and incorporate livestock, right? Livestock is another coping strategies. Farmers tend to their livestock, they sell their livestock, or how the El Nino has been affecting livestock and how that's been a coping strategy. Yeah, if you could just comment on sort of what the capabilities of AGWA and perhaps plans regarding livestock and perhaps looking at non-food crops. Thank you very much.
Dr. Lee?
Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Cici, for that question. It's a very important and interesting one. Indeed, AGWA has been built to be modular and flexible to incorporate cash crops, not only food crops. The only requirements is we need to be able to map them out where they are located. Once we have that location, now it becomes possible to make those forecasts and to build the analytics on top of that crop mapping. We are doing that exercise in Senegal, Benin, Uganda, Malawi, and another country in Benin. And now we are trying to see how to incorporate those cash crops. It's not yet the case, but we are working on the building blocks to make that happen. Now, when it comes to livestock, AGWA, the only thing we can do now for livestock, because based on the methodology and also the use of remote sensing, is to look at the pasture availability in the country. There is something also that in the pipeline. When we will launch the new version of AGWA, which is in the process, we will be also putting those type of data and analytics online. When it comes, I think there's another underlying question when it comes to livestock, which is like farm practice and farm management. How do you mix livestock and cropping at the same time as a strategy? We are not there yet, and I think that requires an extensive data collection to better understand what are the farm management practices that are ongoing in our countries. From there now, the analysis can happen. So again, as you see, data will be the fuel of whatever we do here. And the team is gearing up to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And I see another hand from Tinashe Chavunduka. Over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Lai. I just wanted to thank the presenter on the piece of work. I think it's really talking to the Zimbabwean story that we all know about. I just wanted to add another perspective regarding promotion of small grains. I'm looking at small grains like sorghum and others, given their sort of tolerance levels to drought. So we've got this obsession of producing maize. I think we see this in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi mainly, that farmers are really always planting maize, season in, season out, and they don't even look at the crop failures that they experience every year. But if we look at those small grains, their drought tolerance levels are much better as compared to maize. I think there's need for mindset shift, and it could probably be addressed at policy level. I'm not sure, but I think there's need for that mindset shift amongst farmers to say, try to move away from maize and start producing these small grains that can actually assist in situations like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chavunduka. That's an interesting point, shifting from those staple crops to more drought-tolerant crops. Racine?
I just want to add my voice to that. The diversification is very good in terms of even incomes and also in terms of nutrients. But here, the question that I think might be interesting to look at is what would be the impact of climate change and climate variability in terms of nutrient content of maize? Maybe that would be the selling point into shifting into small grains that might benefit more from climate change. Because climate change, we tend to look at the negative sides of climate change, but you also have positive sides. Sometimes it depends on what you have on the ground growing there. And also for some even areas, you have more rainfall, more intense and longer period of rainfall periods. So we need to see also how can we facilitate intra-African trade. That also is also an opportunity coming from climate change as well. I just would like to extend my voice to what has been said recently. Over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Dr. Paul Maina-Guthiga, I would like to hear from you before we move to the closing remarks. Just some final comments, all the reflections that we've had throughout the session.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Maybe two quick ones. I think one thing that is very clear is that these shocks will continue to be with us. And therefore, we cannot respond to them only when they occur. We have to anticipate them. I think you asked a question earlier, what we have learned from El Nino, from Russia-Ukraine war, from these droughts, together with other, if you like, national level shocks, like the ones someone mentioned are happening in Zimbabwe. I think we need to integrate anticipatory action in our planning. Some of the good and best practices for dealing with shocks, for example, the issues of social safety nets, they should actually be part of our budgeting and planning on a regular basis, not just responding to the shocks when it occurs. I also think that we need to think more about actions that we need to take, especially to respond to this climate change. I know that, for example, preferences do change. I don't know about Southern Africa, but the eastern part of Africa, the preference, for example, of consumers for the traditional grains, sorghum, millets, is not as well as it used to be, so that those commodities even fetch lower prices, low demand in the market. Therefore, we have to have the whole spectrum if really we have to give incentives to farmers to adopt those drought tolerant crops in response to climate change. But generally, I am very happy and grateful for the discussions we have had so far. Back to you, Lai.
Thank you, Paul. And with that, I would like to invite Academia 2063's Managing Director, Dr. Mumini Savadogo, to give us the concluding remarks for this session. Over to you, MD.
Thank you very much, Dr. Butake. Thank you for the moderation. I would like to thank colleagues, Dr. Gatiga and Dr. Makiwa, and also Dr. Ali, and all those who are contributed. We thank the participants. Thank you for raising very interesting questions. Indeed, the subject we are discussing today here is of high importance. As we speak, Zimbabwe government has declared for some time now a state of national disaster, and then, of course, is trying to find ways on how they can avert the food insecurity situation in the country. We have the El Nino effect that is exacerbating other climate variability effects, and you know that those are not only the only factors that are affecting the production and productivity of staple crops like maize. One can think of the pests and other factors that are also involved in. But I would like to say thank you for the insights we got today here through the presentation of this brief. One important thing I want to highlight here is that I think it was two years back, I was in a conference, actually it was a webinar like this one, and we were presenting the impact of climate change on the number of production systems. And one thing that came out is that we have been asked, rather than spending time on the impact, why don't we bring solutions? People are looking forward to solutions, and I think we can understand. But it's important also to understand that without good data, good analytics, good understanding of the problems, you can't devise appropriate solutions. And that's why sometimes we do have, instead of having improvement in our adaptive capacities, we sometimes bring maladaptation into the system. We need to understand, and that's here an example of how we can fill our data gap and analytical gap using those tools of remote sensing, artificial intelligence, combined with other modeling systems. That's our role as Academia 2063. We want to support countries and partners to really improve their capacities in getting those data, more accurate data, more accurate analytics that can help devise appropriate solutions. So this is something that really I want to highlight and I want to offer. Academia is offering those capacities, those improved technologies and approaches to countries and to other partners. We are really open and would like really to bring that so that together we can improve the situations. The second aspect is I want to highlight is that it is work in progress. We understand that we need to continue to improve. For example, in some of the aspects that have been discussed here, but I would like to add more. by looking, for example, when it comes to comparing the results I've seen of the decrease in terms of maize forecast production by around more than 60% compared to last year. But last year, what last year represent, for example, that's a good comparison, but we can go further and trying to compare to, for example, with a normal rainfall year, a humid rainfall year, and a dry, average dry rainfall year for the country. That gives even more appealing information and data that will help. But those are things that we'll continue to work on and improve on the methodology and the analysis we're doing so that we can improve the situation. In terms now, Chad, of policy actions, a number of them have been highlighted here. And I think that we need, beyond the planning, we contribute to that, but I think we need to also together try to put more advocacy on the strategic and programmatic funding perspective. We see that Zimbabwe, I think in 2021, when we look at the data, the progression of the data in terms of government agricultural expenditure, they are above 10% of their government expenditure that is invested in agriculture. But nonetheless, we need very strong investment to really reverse the negative impact of climate variability and climate change in our countries. And this advocacy we really need to do. I'm saying that because I heard from some of the talks for the government that they have actually, for example, a plan for promoting irrigation in the country. Once you have those plans, we need also then, of course, to invest a lot because irrigation systems in the country is costly and we need to advocate for it. We also need to diversify. We discussed about it in terms of production systems, in terms of type of crops, but also in terms of coping strategies, and that we are also working in and can support the countries towards that. So we want also to emphasize the fact that we are able to, based on those results, to prioritize interventions in terms of emergency interventions. And I would like, before I end, to really congratulate those local initiatives I've seen already in Zimbabwe, where local NGOs and some even people are really engaging themselves, mobilized to provide food to children and other very vulnerable people around the different cities and so on. I've seen it presented on TVs and so on. So those are very good initiatives. We are in a state of disaster, and surely all hands must be put together and try to alleviate the situation and try to avert that food security that we are in. But in terms of scientific contribution, that's what we are doing and that we want to continue to do. And we hope that our voice will be heard, our documents will be used effectively to contribute to alleviate the situation. So thank you very much all for your contribution, for your participations, and looking forward to having you in the next sessions. Thank you very much. Back to you, Lai.
Thank you very much, MD Dr. Savadogo. We're talking about anticipatory solutions, investments, policy change, solutions. It has been a delightful hour of rich exchange and learning. Thank you immensely to all our speakers. Thank you to Dr. Paul Guthiga and your co-authors. Thank you to Dr. Emmanuel Mwakiwa. In spite of the fact that he's traveling, he made the time to be here to share his inputs. We appreciate you. Thank you to Dr. Racine Lee, Dr. Greenmore Machaya, Dr. Savadogo, and all the speakers today, Titsi, Mr. Evaristo, Mr. Tinashi, and everyone else who contributed in the chat as well. do not leave without reading the briefs. Head to academia2063.com, publications, and you will find 2 El Nino briefs already published with many more in the pipeline. Also head to agwa.org, aagwa.org, and you will see over 140 agwa forecast briefs. Of course, follow us on social media on X, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Academia 2063, and we will be reaching out to you with details of our next El Nino session. Until then, goodbye and see you next time. Ciao.
Ciao, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.